I remember fire, screaming, the sound of metal folding in on itself, and then silence. I was just 8 years old on a flight with 93 other people. Everyone else died. I didn't even have a scratch. They say it was a miracle that someone or something must have cradled me in that wreckage. I still don't remember falling, but I remember opening my eyes and being completely alone. Was it fate, luck, divine intervention? All I know is I should not be here, but I am. It was a cloudy morning in southern India, July 1970. I was 8 years old, sitting next to my mother on Indian Airlines Flight 557. We were flying from Madurai to Chennai. I don't remember much about the plane. I remember the window, the way the clouds moved like rivers. I remember holding my mother's hand. And I remember the sound of the engines, a kind of humming roar that vibrated in your bones. There were 94 of us on board. I had no idea that I would be the only one to walk away. We were just minutes from landing when something went wrong. I've been told the plane began descending too fast. The weather was bad, visibility low, but at the time I didn't know any of that. I just remember a loud noise, like a balloon exploding inside my skull. Then shaking, then screaming, and then black. The plane had clipped a tree, then a wall. Then it broke apart, ripping open like paper, and slammed into the ground in flames. Fire, metal, silence. And me, lying near the broken fuselage, untouched. The first rescuers on scene couldn't believe their eyes. There was so much wreckage, so much loss. And yet, in the middle of it all, a boy, still, breathing, no blood, no broken bones, just wide eyes and a dazed expression. They thought I must have been thrown clear, but I hadn't moved. I was still strapped into my seat. Except my seat had landed in a strange hollow beside the wreck, a space just big enough for me, a crater no one could explain. Some say it was a miracle, others said it was luck, but even the rescue workers admitted it was like something had wrapped around me and shielded me from death. If you're the kind of person who believes timing is never just chance, stories like this are for you. Like, share, and follow Lanes and Lanterns for more true moments that defy logic. And tell us in the comments, have you ever been spared when you had no reason to be? They say children don't process trauma the same way adults do. That might be true, but I remember the faces, not the crash, not the impact, but the hours after. I remember sitting in a makeshift tent beside the wreckage. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there with my mother's handbag clutched in my lap. One of the rescue workers placed a cloth over my shoulders like a cape. I remember thinking it was heavy. What I didn't know then, what no one told me right away, was that my mother was gone. So was everyone else. 93 people died in that crash, and I, Vishwash, a boy barely tall enough to reach the airplane seatbelt on his own, was the only one left. Doctors examined me. they found nothing wrong. No fractures, no head trauma, not even bruises. They were baffled. One physician said my body must have folded just right in the crash. Another said maybe the seat acted as a cradle, but others weren't so quick to explain it away. One man, a retired pilot, visited me in the hospital. He stood quietly in the corner for a long time before saying, "I've seen hundreds of wrecks. This wasn't survival. This was protection." He didn't elaborate. He just nodded and left. I began speaking more as the days passed. Journalists came, cameras flashed, my story ran in papers across India. Boy survives plane crash alone. Some called me blessed, others called me the chosen one. A few even whispered that I was marked for something. But none of that made sense to me. I just wanted to go home. Except there wasn't a home to go back to. My mother had been my whole world, and now there was silence. I stayed with relatives afterward. Life continued, but nothing felt the same. I was called the miracle boy for years, but inside I didn't feel like a miracle. I felt like a ghost. Why me? Why did I live when they didn't? It's a question I still carry, though I've stopped trying to answer it. Because maybe the point isn't knowing why. Maybe the point is what you do after. Has life ever forced you to carry something you didn't ask for? Something heavy, unexplained, sacred even? Let us know in the comments. You're not alone. And don't forget to like, share, and follow Lanes and Lanterns. These stories are real, and they remind us that some hands are invisible. Time passed, the boy they called the miracle child faded from the headlines, but I didn't fade. I grew up quietly. By the time I was a teenager, no one pointed at me anymore, but people still remembered, especially when I entered a room and introduced myself. "You're the boy from the plane, aren't you?" Yes, I was. It never left me. How could it, when your life begins again in the ashes of something so final, it becomes part of your breath, even when you're not thinking about it? It's there, like a second heartbeat. I struggled in school for a while, not because I wasn't smart, but because I couldn't answer the one question that mattered. What am I here for? Every year that passed without purpose felt like a kind of theft. Someone else could have lived, someone with more to give. Why was it me? And yet, despite the weight of that question, there was something else, something I couldn't name, a feeling that I was being watched over, protected. I was nearly hit by a bus once in my 20s. I should have been crushed. I wasn't. In my 30s, a fire broke out in my apartment. My room was untouched. I began to notice a pattern, close calls, near misses, like I was being shielded. That's when I started believing it wasn't just survival, it was appointment. I didn't have to be famous, I didn't have to be rich, but I had to be present. I had to live differently, like someone had loaned me time and I was borrowing grace with every breath. So I gave. I mentored kids, I volunteered in aviation safety programs, I started a fund to help families of crash victims, quiet things behind the scenes, but meaningful. And then one day, I met a boy whose mother had died in a car crash. He was 9, the same age I had been, angry, silent, lost. I didn't try to fix him. I just sat beside him. And when he asked me, "How did you survive when everyone else died?" I didn't tell him a scientific answer. I just said, "I think someone was holding me, and maybe they're holding you too." He nodded. For the first time in weeks, he nodded. I don't tell this story often, but when I do, I tell it like it happened. Not polished, not dramatic, just the truth. One day, the sky fell, and I was the only one who walked away. Some call it fate, others call it random. I call it mercy. Because the more you live, the more you realize we are not as alone as we think. If this story moved you, please like, share, and follow Lanes and Lanterns. These are real stories of timing, protection, and unseen purpose. And tell us in the comments, have you ever felt spared, like you were meant to stay for a reason? Your moment might just become our next story.